The Great Trouble by Deborah Hopkinson. Chapter 5. Urchins on Excursion. I stood there, frozen with horror, for at least 10 minutes. What next? Behind me, up in that room, was Mr. Griggs. In front of me was the lion, and looming up around every corner was the shadow of Fisheye Bill Tyler. Bad air brings trouble, Abel Cooper had warned. It seemed he was right. But how could so much trouble happen in just a few days? I couldn't do much for Mr. Griggs, and unless I wanted to hide in a London sewer and never come out, I'd have to take my chances that Fisheye might find me. I needed my situation at the Lion, and my 4 shillings back. The only other person who might help me was Dr. John Snow. Or would he? Even though I took care of Dr. Snow's animals every night when I was done sweeping the tailor shop, I rarely saw the doctor himself. He was either out on a call or attending some important meeting or dinner. I tried to avoid the stern Mrs. Weatherburn, his housekeeper, except when it was time to get paid. Still, it was worth a try. It might be the only chance I have left, I thought. I was about to set off when Florrie Baker came storming toward me, buzzing like an angry fly. "Eel, is this your doing?" "What are you talking about?" Then I saw. Behind Florrie were 3 dirty, wailing kids. Betsy and Bernie came first, sniffling and gulping. Bernie must have scraped his knee. Trickles of blood ran down his leg. Annie Lewis, who'd tied bits of thread and ribbons around her wrist, tagged behind. Woof, woof. Adding to the confusion was Dilly. She dashed in circles around the crying children. Every once in a while she caught sight of her own tail and began to chase it. When she didn't catch it, she barked harder. "Dilly, shush!" Florrie scolded. She turned to me, hands on her hips. "Annie and I found these 2 crying over by the Golden Square, all turned around. Bernie fell and nearly got trampled by a horse and cart." "It was a giant horse," Betsy reported. "I thought Bernie would get smashed flat." "They said you sent them off," Florrie continued. "Eel, they're no more than babies. You know their pa likes to keep them close." "The horse was giant, a black monster." Bernie gave a huge hiccup, his face stained with dirty tears. Then he remembered the most important thing. "We couldn't find the Iceman. I want my ice. You promised." "Me too," Betsy begged, tugging at my shirt. "And I want to see the doctor's animals. Florrie said you'd take us." I glared at Florrie, who shrugged. "We may as well bring them all and give their mums a break." "Oh, Florrie, think how it'll look. It ain't businesslike," I protested. I got something I need to discuss with Dr. Snow." "Look at you all puffed up just 'cause you take care of animals for some swell doctor." Florrie sniffed. "It ain't like you work for the Queen herself. They won't be any trouble." I shook my head and grumbled. "You're all trouble." Florrie put her hands on her hips, waiting for me to give in. Florrie was stubborn. She was also the closest thing I had to a best friend. But still, I hadn't told her about the Blue Death, or about Mr. Huggins accusing me of being a thief. They all watched me. Even Dilly stared up at me expectantly. I gave in at last. All right, but you gotta stay close and keep up." "I'll run in and let Mrs. Griggs know," Florrie offered, moving toward the tailor shop. "No, I'll go." I put out a hand to stop her. "It ain't good for my reputation if I'm left standing here on the road like a nursemaid." I ran back inside and up a few steps. I yelled out to Mrs. Lewis and Mrs. Griggs that their little ones were safe with Florrie and me. I didn't wait for an answer. I didn't want to go back into that room. Not unless I had to. "So, Bernie, tell me," said Florrie as we walked along, "what's your favorite ice?" "Mine's raspberry." "Lemon," he said. "Pa likes strawberry." "How about you, Betsy?" I asked. Betsy didn't answer. Her face was pinched and white, almost as if she might be sick herself. She tripped and I caught her hand. Regent Street was a bustle of cabs, horses, hawkers calling out their wares, and crowds of people. I looked behind me. "Keep up, Annie Ribbons." "I am. I just had to look at the pretty hats in the window," she squeaked. Annie was nearly 9, but she was as scrawny as a 6-year-old. That's how it was in our neighborhood. Mr. Lewis might be a constable, but that didn't mean it was easy to feed a family. Constable Lewis. I wondered if he would stand up for me with Mr. John Huggins. But that could be dangerous. If Constable Lewis knew the whole truth, there was a chance I could be put in the St. James workhouse. I was too much like Thumbless Jake for that. I wanted the sky overhead. Watch out! I pulled Betsy back from a cart that came so close the mare jerked her head in alarm. Slow down, Eel, Florrie panted, trying to keep up and dragging Bernie behind her. What's put you in such a bad temper? We're supposed to be having fun. I scowled and pulled them off into a side street. It was quieter here. I let out my breath and felt the tension drain away a little. Fisheye could have pickpockets at work and busy crowds most any place, but we would be safe in this neighborhood. Florrie sent the little ones ahead. So what's wrong? She wanted to know. Has something happened at the Lion? What makes you say that? Well, for one thing, it's the middle of the day and you're not at work, Florrie pointed out. And for another, you're as bristly as the needles on one of Annie's pincushions. Mr. John Huggins thinks I'm a thief, I admitted. Was it Hugsy who got you in trouble? I nodded. He snuck into my things, took my money, and tried to convince his uncle I'd stolen it. Now I've probably lost my place. I stopped, not wanting to spill the whole story of my secret box. How did you guess Hugsy had something to do with it? Florrie snorted. You've never tried to hide that you're smarter than him. He's the nephew of the owners, after all. I thought you'd be on my side. I am, I'm just saying. Those of us on the bottom got to be careful. Florrie touched me gently on the shoulder. Have you asked Mr. Griggs to help? He must know Mr. Huggins. I hesitated. Mr. Griggs wasn't feeling well enough to see me. I almost told her everything, that the tailor most likely had been struck with the Blue Death. But this wasn't the time, what with Betsy and Bernie so close. Besides, maybe if I put it off, it wouldn't be true. Florrie was silent a moment. Then she said, as if the idea had just come into her mind, Eel, you told me Hugsy took your money. What money? What have you been saving money for? I shrugged. Nothing much. You know, sometimes when I ask you things, it's like you don't want to answer. Florrie fixed me with her clear, honest gaze. And when you do, it's like you're trying to sell me fish that's gone off a bit and you think I can't smell it. Then she sprinted ahead to pick up Bernie, who'd fallen down again. I was left to walk alone and think about her words. By the time we got to Sackville Street, with its clean stone townhouses all lined up in a neat row, Annie, Bernie, and Betsy were wide-eyed. It's so quiet, almost like being in St. Luke's, Betsy breathed. Nice, ain't it? This is where the swells live, Florrie explained. To me, she said, I'll be working in a fine house like this soon. Dr. Snow lives in number 18, I said, pointing to a house with a large door and with 4 windows on all 3 floors. I still couldn't quite believe that someone as important as Dr. Snow trusted me, a mudlark, to look after his animals. Your doctor has this whole house to himself? Asked Betsy, craning her neck to see the upper floors. I nodded proudly. Of course he does. Dr. John Snow is quite a gentleman. So be on your best conduct in his yard or there won't be any ices on the way home. I jerked my head. Now follow me. We need to go around the back way, through the alley. Mrs. Jane Weatherburn, Dr. Snow's housekeeper, leaves newspapers and food scraps out there for me to use. How did you meet Dr. Snow? Florrie asked. In Covent Garden. He came to the market to buy a guinea pig, I said. You know how busy and noisy it is there. Just as Dr. Snow was putting the guinea pig into a little box to take it home, a horse spooked behind him, toppling a cart of vegetables and making a terrible racket. Well, the guinea pig got such a fright, it squirmed out of Dr. Snow's grasp. Luckily, I happened to be standing right there to catch it. They were all watching me now, and I continued the story, holding up my hands as though cupping an invisible guinea pig. Here, sir, let me help you. I'm good with animals. My name is Eel, so I know exactly how these creatures think when they're trying to wriggle away. You gave it back to him then? Bernie asked, sounding disappointed. I nodded. Before you know it, I had it safe in its little carrying box. Then he offered you the job? Betsy asked. Weren't quite as easy as all that. I had a trial period first to prove myself, I recalled. And not just to Dr. Snow, but to Mrs. Weatherburn, too. She's like a general. Inspected my work for 3 weeks before she gave me the nod. She had also given me a warning. Boy, if I catch you taking advantage of Dr. Snow's generous nature, I'll be getting the constable after you, and don't think I won't. Now, I looked around warily. Should I have brought Florrie and the little ones here at all? I wouldn't want Mrs. Weatherburn to think we were a gang of thieves." I could just imagine her bursting out the back door, holding her broom high and shouting, "Scat!"